Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Dr. Nadya Zhexembayeva. Nadya is an entrepreneur, a scientist, speaker, educator, consultant, and author of several books. She has given herself the title of Chief Reinvention Officer, and today we will speak about her latest book, the Chief Reinvention Officer Handbook, How to Thrive in Chaos. Nadia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So one of the things that impressed me about the book is the fast turnaround of writing and publishing this book. As you mentioned, the publishing industry is a slow industry from the 20th century, and it goes through many process of approval, and it takes years to bring a book to the market. But since you are constantly reinventing yourself, an industry that you touch in your everyday life, you accelerated the process of bringing this book to the market. So I'm so surprised about that. I wonder if we could start with you telling us a little bit about your background. You have all these titles with the title of Chief Reinvention Officer as your main one right now, but you teach, you are an entrepreneur, you are a scientist, you are all of these things. So how did that get started?
It started long before I was born. I come from the Soviet Union, and this is a particular history, a particular combination of victories and horrible, horrible, painful moments. And one of those moments shaped my reality 100 years before I even realized what I want to do. So, in the late 1920s, early 1930s of the last century, the Soviet Union engineered an artificial famine that was designed to kill big portion of my country's population. 40% of all Kazakhs were killed. Recently, the Wall Street Journal did a massive story on the forgotten famine of Kazakhstan. It was created to control the nation. And my great-grandparents did not die in the famine, they survived. But because they were vocal opponents of the government regime, they were executed as enemies of the state. So my grandparent, the only surviving person at age 12, was sent to orphanage house to speak the language he never spoke, to live in a country he doesn't understand, to move from Kazakhstan to very far deep into Russia. And his mindset shaped my dad's mindset, and my dad's mindset shaped my mindset, which is all about preparing for any kind of disruption, the most unimaginable disruption. And I was always interested in that. And then, of course, I was growing up and the Soviet Union collapsed. And for me, it was this realization that things we take as unshakable, your government, currency, ministries, police, I don't know, anything you take for granted, it can disappear literally overnight, literally overnight. So when I started looking into a doctorate degree, I wanted specifically to study large system survival. And that's where everything started. I specialized on figuring out how do you make sure your company survives, your community survives, your country doesn't disappear, how do you make sure your culture survives, or just your career. How do you make sure you personally, your career?
You
Uh,
know, there is a trend in the publishing industry nowadays because many of the books that we see nowadays, we can sample them through electronic devices. Many of these books put like a big drama right at the beginning, and you just it was a synopsis of your life with a big dramatic event right from the start in the 1920s, the Soviet Union trying to uh, eliminate this part of the country. So this is so, well, first of all, it's hard to believe that such things happen, but it's also, I need to know more. Okay, so you come from this background with so much tragedy, and this shape your mindset. And now in how do you get all this education? Because you come from a poor part of the globe, and you know, you don't have access to all the facilities that we have now here in North America.
Yeah. Grace and a lot of generosity from other people. So the first time I came to the US, I came as a part of a youth organization in 95 and 96. And then I got a scholarship from the United States government. There was a very famous scholarship program called Freedom Support Act for new countries who just got their independence. And I came here for my college degree in 98. And my professors, who I owe a debt I don't know if I will ever repay, my professors forced me to apply to the graduate school. And because I had no money to go for the interview to Cleveland, I studied in New York, they actually fundraised money to buy me a ticket and send me to Cleveland. My professors in Cleveland, when I got into a doctorate degree, I was 22. I was the youngest person they ever admitted for PhD in management. You can have PhD in physics younger and math because those are fundamental sciences. But for management, you need a little bit more experience. And I cannot believe that they had faith in me. And they also gave me practical experience from year one. I had projects with real companies and organizations. So I owe huge debt of gratitude to my graduate school. And then every day there was somebody who was giving me a chance and paving a way for me. And I hope I can pay it forward as much as I'm trying to pay it backwards as I go back to my college to donate time and support it, as I go back to my graduate school, Case Western Reserve, and support their efforts there. And as I try to also give those opportunities to those who come after me.
Wow, so you are a product of other people's generosity.
100%.
Amazing. Okay, so then at what moment in your career you decide to start writing books, because this is not the first one that you write?
Mhm. Again, it all comes back to generosity. So I'm in a graduate school. I study large system survival, and one of the elements of large system survival is everything that has to do with ecosystem sustainability. So thinking of a business, I'm in a business school, think of a business as an ecosystem. And it's not just the human ecosystem, but also the natural resources that you use, the free services that business uses and doesn't even recognize. For example, we used pollination in agriculture and assumed that it's a free service that nature will keep providing us until the bees started dying and we had to pay people to pollinate or drones to pollinate or come up with genetically modified crop to avoid pollination. So I got an invitation from my professor to help him to write my first book was a co-authored book called Embedded Sustainability, the Next Big Competitive Advantage. And that was, I want to say 2008, 2009. And since I loved the experience so much, and I by then was already a reviewer for an amazing publisher out of California, Barrett Kohler, and I would review other people's books as a specialist in a particular area, which is sustainability and large systems. I had an idea, I mentioned it to the editor, and the editor is like, okay, let's do the second book. So the second book I did on my own. And this book is self-published and written by about 3,000 people. So
Wow.
this was a completely independent book. And this is the book that just came out, and it's already beating records in terms of awards compared to any other books we've ever done. So it's been a blessing.
Well, congratulations. Okay, so large system survival. Okay, so let's talk about that for a
Yeah.
second. As we many of know, there are many large systems. Let's stick to business corporations that unfortunately haven't survived. And when I say that, I am thinking of big corporations such as Kodak, Nokia, Blockbuster, Sears. What is it that they did wrong that they were not able to evolve with the times? I mean, they have the resources, they have the money, they have the brain power, they have the know-how. What is it that prevented them to go to the next stage?
Two things. One is external and one is internal. External is not understanding that the speed of change has accelerated so much that it requires a fundamental change in the internal way of doing business. So what do I mean by that? For the last 200 years, the average life cycle of a business model, from the moment you start a startup to the moment you go bankrupt or you sell it and it goes into another business, the average life cycle was about 75 years. You could work in the same business, milking the same cow, doing about the same things for 75 years. I could graduate from college, enter your business, and do pretty much the same thing. My entire career, retire, and never see massive transformation. 75. What do you think is the number right now? We do this research. So I know the number because I have a data from September 2020, but what would be your guess?
Well,
75.
I'm not gonna guess because I've been reading your book.
You know the answer. So it was 75. It shrunk to about 15 in the late 20th century, about late 80s, early 90s. This is globalization plus the tech.com boom. And the shrunk cycles are 15. 2020, our research says that the average life cycle across all industries is 6, but about 60% of companies reinvent every 3 years or less to survive. So if you think about that difference, 75 versus 3, 4, 5, your strategy, your idea what strategy is has to change, because you can no longer do the same thing for 5, 6, 10, 20 years. Your idea of what it means to have finances, the way you manage finances in a volatile world is very different than it is in a stable world, long cycle, stable, predictable reality. Your idea of supply chain management, these things such as just-in-time supply management, impossible because everything is very volatile, so you will not get it just in time. So number one, not understanding the external world, how much it's shifting. And number two, internally developing what I call the Titanic Syndrome. This syndrome, this corporate disease, it's also an individual disease that brings about our own death in companies, in business, because of our own arrogance, this idea that we are too good to fail, too big to fail, too successful to fail, attachment to past successes, or simple refusal to notice the new reality. So those two forces, the fact that the cycles are shortening, so it's pressuring us from the outside, and our own Titanic Syndrome pressuring us from inside, creates a horrible, horrible cocktail that kills all those companies you mentioned. Boston Consulting Group just projected that about 33% of all companies will die in the next 5 years. So we are looking at turnaround in business that we haven't seen for a long time.
And is it technology that is reducing the amount of time of this cycle? For example, before the electricity, things used to be done one way, and then electricity came, and now we have all kind of little engines and gadgets and lights and whatever, which transform the whole industry of whatever you were in. So I guess now with internet and microchips and I don't know, all this new innovation, of course, I guess the cycle has to be compressed, no?
Absolutely. So there are a few forces that are shrinking the cycle. Tech is absolutely one of them. We are in the era of exponential growth. So what we used to take 100 years to develop, now because of all the pieces already in place, it takes us much shorter to develop. I'll give you an example. A pen, yeah? Very, very no tech product. But it's made out of plastic. Until about 100 years ago, we didn't know what is plastic and how to synthesize it. Metal, until very recently, it was very expensive to produce metal, but now we developed enough technologies to make it very affordable. The gel color inside, and on and on and on. So all of these things that used to take us a long period of time, we developed them enough that now the amount of building blocks already available to us, thanks to the previous generations that pushed for sometimes thousands of years to give us this technology, is at our fingertips. What we can afford today is incomparably more than the kings and queens could afford even 100 years ago. So tech is one, but there are other things. Second thing is globalization. You used to compete with yourself and your neighborhood. Now you're competing with every single person in the world. Um, Accessibility to knowledge, thanks to internet, but also thanks to a different mindset, this idea of open innovation. When Tesla is giving away all of its engineering paperwork, please do your own electric cars. This idea of open innovation and open access to data, it used to be that you develop a know-how and you are sitting on that golden egg. Now anybody can back engineer it in 2 seconds. It means nothing. The idea is a commodity. Execution is a whole different story, but the idea is a commodity. So tech, globalization, access to knowledge that is extremely democratizing and equalizing the game, and also access to capital. We have to be very honest, even in the 90s, where can you get capital? It's just a few banks in the world. Where can you get capital now? You can ask your neighbors through crowdfunding. You can go to many different ways to raise the capital. The democracy in finance and access to capital is insane right now. You can create your own currency, your own token, and do an initial token offering. I mean, the varieties you have to finance your idea is incomparable. So all of those things and more is shrinking the cycles.
Okay, so you mentioned in your book that this crisis and disruption, this chaos is not temporary. I mean, that this is the way that that we are heading, that is a constant chaos, constant perpetual change. Can you elaborate on that?
It comes from data, right? So I am first and foremost a scientist, and I have to look at what is data telling me. Facts are friendly. This is a saying that one of my friends gave me, wonderful professor J.B. Kasarjan. He kept saying, Nadya, facts are friendly. They're not here to punish you or to scare you or whatever. Facts are friendly. Look at the facts. And the facts are showing to us that all of these forces are not going to get smaller or weaker in the coming decades. They're only going to get stronger. There's absolutely no reason why this trends will be reversed. We will not see less technology, we will see more. And the further the artificial intelligence goes, the more we will be able to produce, because it's not just us who are creating new ideas now and new technology, but it's also artificial intelligence creating while we are sleeping. So if it was 7-8 billion people on the planet creating new technology, now it will be exponential and limitless resource. On another end, we can see how quickly the generational expectations are happening and changing. Therefore, consumers, if their preferences were pretty stable for a long period of time, I bought a shirt, I want to wear the same shirt. I'm pretty sure what shirts I wear and which shirts I don't wear. Today, generations' loyalty to the brands or to the particular style is very, very low. They switch easily. Their attachment to things is very low. So your consumers will force you to change much faster. The competition is not going to subside. The idea that we will become back to nationalized, it might be certain pockets of the world will close their borders, but generally speaking, the idea of moving towards more integrated world is a trend that is hardly reversible. So almost nothing in the data tells us that this can change, which means we should stop pretending that change is a once in a time event and start thinking of it as a normal feature of our life.
Okay, well, change, biologically, we fear change. You mentioned in one of your TED Talks that we fear, our adrenaline goes up and our we get ready to fight or flight. So that's us biologically, which translates to the corporations that we run. And you are telling us that we have to embrace this chaos, this change. We have to make it into a competitive advantage. So how do we change that mindset of turning fear into an additional advantage that we could use to thrive?
It's an interesting thing. It's two forces working simultaneously. In terms of the moment, in the moment, yes, we have this automatic autonomic response called fight or flight syndrome that forces our body to react very negatively towards any kind of disruption, and we have zero control over it. You cannot tell your kidneys stop producing adrenaline. You cannot tell your heart stop pumping the blood. This is not in control. This is automatic response. But when we talk about the short term, this short-term effect is, for average human being, scientists suggest that is about 90 seconds. You don't have a choice the first 90 seconds, but after the first 90 seconds, you can choose to see things differently. The problem is that in our head, we can restart the cycle of 90 seconds again and again. And we can stick in that cycle for 9 years, not 90 seconds, for 90 years. I know people who are still upset about the crisis of 2008. It's been how many years since then? 13 years, and people are still upset about it. So they are essentially telling their brain to restart the cycle. And when you are in the moment of fear, you cannot think. You cannot think not because you're stupid. You cannot think because your body thinks that you are physically attacked. And to physically survive, it needs to redistribute the blood supply from your brain to your muscles. So you can kill the enemy or you can run away from the enemy. So you literally cannot, you don't have enough blood, oxygen in your brain to think. Therefore, you're digging your own grave because you're sticking with the 90 seconds. The longer you're there, the less your creative capacity and the more at risk you are. Good news. In terms of a long-term view of change, we are wonderful at reinvention. Babies are reinventors by birth. I have a 17-year-old daughter. And when I remember her learning how to walk or how to talk, she didn't sit there and say, give me a bonus, otherwise I won't change. She didn't need a motivation, right? We are natural at reinvention. We like new things. We don't like when they're threatening, when they are put on top of us without our engagement. But when she engages in change, she loved it, absolutely loved it. So our job as managers of ourselves, as chief reinvention officers of our own life, and then as leaders of others, first, allow people to live through their 90 seconds. My daughter comes from work now, and she is very upset. And I start proposing solutions to her, and she says, Mom, give me my 90 seconds. Just let me be angry. So number one, it's a 3-step thing. What to do? Number one, give your people 90 seconds. Let them be angry. Don't interrupt. Number two, stop the 90 seconds and offer an alternative view and use the native capacity that people have to reinvent by allowing them to choose what they do next. Don't impose change on them at that moment, but engage. There's wonderful research that is a classic now. You can Google it up. It's been published in Harvard Business Review and other places about a pajama factory that did an experiment where they imposed change by announcing to their workers versus engage their workers in designing how change will happen. They didn't have a chance to change or not to change. None of us have it. But they didn't have a chance to change or not to change. They just had a chance, no participation. The difference in terms of financial results is about 50%. So this is a proven scientific fact. We just should start using it on a daily basis. Sorry for a long answer to a great.
No, it's quite curious. And I like the idea that some people are stuck in the 90-second loop for years. And it makes me think of a friend who is afraid of the stock market, and he's been playing the idea of the 90 seconds for years, and he's invested in cash and gold, and it doesn't matter what happens in the economy and the world around us. There is always an excuse to go to cash or gold.
And therefore we limit ourselves. As I said, there's some external forces, but scientifically speaking, only about 13% of all disruptions are completely out of our control. 87% we have control over. So we choose to dig our own grave. Nobody chooses for us. And therefore, the good news, it means that we can dig ourselves out. We don't need to wait for somebody else to save us.
Well, Nadia, the thing that I like about your book is that you teach us how we can be Chief Reinvention Officer, not only of the organization, but of our life. So can you tell us one more time the title of the book and where people can follow you and, of course, buy the book?
Absolutely. The title of the book is The Chief Reinvention Officer Handbook, How to Thrive in Chaos. As I mentioned, it was written by about 3,000 practitioners in the world in all kinds of countries and industries, reinventing companies and reinventing themselves. It comes with 9 tools. You can see it here. It actually has business model cards you can tear out and play with. So it's a very tool oriented, and you can test it out for free. We have an 85-page book preview at learn2reinvent/handbook. Learn number 2 reinvent.com/handbook, and you can buy it in all retailers. So we are in Amazon all over the world, Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, and many other retailers, and of course your local bookstores.
Nadya, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.